William Brindley, the CEO of NetHope, is going to come up and lead our next panel. And it's actually a very exciting panel because we have corporations that have come together and are now working together and launching what they're calling the Humanitarian Cloud. And so really hearing how corporations can work together and really leverage those partnerships and see the value in one another and really make those strong connections. So we certainly look forward to figuring out how in the world you did this and what we can look forward to.
Hello, good afternoon. Am I on? Not really. There we go. Great. Nice to see you all. Hope you're having a good afternoon this afternoon. We're very pleased that you're here for this panel. The panel is on, as was just mentioned, the Humanitarian Cloud. My name is Bill Brindley, and I'm the CEO of NetHope. Our panelists will introduce themselves, their names briefly in a minute, but we thought for the sake of time, we would simply, when they answer the first question around the panel, they would you could look them up in the book and you can find out more details about their background so that we can really use the time to get to the heart of the topic of the Humanitarian Cloud. A number of organizations, including those on this stage, my own organization and our 35 members and a dozen or so other partners, have collaborated to set up this new framework and approach which we are calling the Humanitarian Cloud, an exciting new project. And so what we'd like to do is ask and answer three questions this afternoon. And the first is, what problem is the Humanitarian Cloud addressing? The second is, what type of ways can the current collaborators, such as those on the stage, and all of us in this room in one way or another, how can you participate? How are they, and how can you participate in the Humanitarian Cloud? Thirdly, what are some of the potential inhibitors to success? What are some of the things that might be obstacles or risks that we can anticipate and work on now to make this a success? Not only for the organizations involved, which is obviously penultimate, but ultimately for the benefit of humanity as we deploy literally all around the world. So with that, let's begin, and we'll ask each of our panelists when they address the first question to simply give their name and their organization. As I say, you can quickly reference them in this nice book. So with that, we'd like to ask the question and go down the line here around what is the problem that the Humanitarian Cloud is addressing? Why is it needed? What are the benefits? What is it trying to do?
So I'm Dan Matt with F5 Networks, and I guess our expertise is in building really big systems that are robust. So sort of the most demanding websites around the world or social media and stuff that's being used like crazy in this room today relies on our gear to make it run and tick and be secure day in and day out. So to me, one of the problems that the Humanitarian Cloud solves is that we let the social innovators do what they're good at, right? So they don't have to worry about the IT back end and all the systems and what happens. We want to be able to give them a platform that they can simply use and deliver the services that they want to deliver out to people around the world. And to me, that's really what it's all about. And the thing that makes it very interesting to me, we had a great example several years ago when the big earthquake in China took place. And one of our employees was there, and the Red Cross site crashed just under, lots of people were paying attention to it, accessing their site, wanting to make donations, and it just toppled over under all the traffic. So this employee got together with several of his buddies and decided to go and help the Red Cross build out a site that was robust and would withstand the traffic so they could start taking donations again. And so one of the things that the Humanitarian Cloud ought to address for me is that people shouldn't have to go through that. The system should take care of that stuff for the people so the social innovators can concentrate on their mission.
Excellent. Thank you. Doug?
Yep. Yeah, hi, I'm Doug Smith with VMware, and I run our global partner strategy and operations, and we actually had some folks from the VMware Foundation here a little earlier. I think they've headed out. And our company's in cloud computing. We actually do the baseline infrastructure that kind of runs the cloud, is what we do, and we work with the other vendors up here extensively on a number of different projects. I actually, yeah, so what do I see the benefits of cloud computing for nonprofits, for NGOs? Yeah, I think it's tremendous. We see it in the commercial space, which is how do you free up dollars from run to actually go do build, right? I think probably everybody in this room, the organizations you're with, you're out building new applications or new ways to reach your base. But a lot of the money is often wrapped up into running the current infrastructure. And cloud computing really allows that budget to be freed up and deployed into either the mission itself or into deploying new apps.
So sort of strategic cost management, being able to take it out of there and redeploy it to more strategic purposes.
It's literally, you know, it's one of those things, if you're not an IT person, you should go back and ask your IT person, what are we doing about the cloud? Because it is a way that dollars will be freed up in your organization.
Exactly. Aziz, our friend from HP, please.
Can you hear me now? My name is Aziz Mohamed, and I work for HP or Hewlett-Packard. I run the sustainability and social innovation. I focus on health, but I also manage some initiatives around education. And the cloud is pretty actually close to everything we're doing in social innovation and sustainability. I'm not going to talk about, you know, what HP is doing in terms of cloud because it's no brainer. We are, you know, one of the largest IT companies, so we have very clear focus on cloud as part of our overall strategy. But in terms of the work we're doing in social innovation, you know, and based on the interaction I see with the NGOs, cost is a big, you know, factor in all the decisions they make. And one of the things, you know, that I noticed, you know, throughout the work we're doing, like there is a program in Africa called the Early Infants Diagnosis, where we're basically building data centers like on a small scale, but to provide online data access to HIV infants diagnosis or testing across Kenya. Now it's being replicated in other countries. You know, when we started this project, you know, it was basically, you know, we spent a lot of money in Kenya, like over $1 million. We have a database that is connected to the cloud. Now, when we're doing the replication in the other countries, because we already have the infrastructure, it's actually the cost is going down by more than 60% in each of the other countries where we're replicating. So when I look at that as, you know, as a donor, there's huge saving of money, and as an NGO, you know, they don't need to worry about IT management or resources or budgets. They leave it to people like us and other partners who knows how to do this best. Yep.
I'm Chris Van Wagener. I'm the Chief Strategy Officer for Commvault. We're a data management company. My view on it is kind of different. If you look at innovation, it took about 30 years for radio to reach 500 million users. It took TV about 15 years. It took Facebook 8 months. What, you know, all organizations are facing is a pace of innovation that is only accelerating, and behind that is piles and piles and piles of data. And really, the humanitarian cloud is a way for organizations to get their arms around this and leverage it for better value. Surely, you know, you're going to get some cost reduction out of not doing that, out of not building things yourself and letting people, many on this panel, who are much better at it than you are, to build that for you. But I think the issue is, can you keep up with the pace of innovation and leverage those things for your causes?
So great, just to mix it up a little bit on that question, and Doug, if you mind, so we are talking about a technology approach that allows what you might call, yesterday we were at JP Morgan, perhaps they would call their front, middle, and back offices to work more effectively, right, in a bank. And so we're talking about the front office, if you will, where the field work is being done by many of you in this room and hundreds of thousands of people around the world in health and education and stopping human trafficking and conservation and so forth, doing work in remote and difficult areas, in disasters and so forth. How can we use technology in a smart way through the cloud, mobile, etc., create this ecosystem to enable that to be much more effective and more powerful and reach more people faster in a better way? That's one side, the old effectiveness side of the equation. And then you have the sort of middle back office, which is a lot of what we've been doing initially, right? Which is sort of the infrastructure and where a lot of the money goes. And it's harder to get the money on the front end, often embedded in a grant or something for if you're an NGO or a nonprofit. But it's very difficult to get leverage out of that. So this, you can now take the money out, as you were saying, and deploy it to the front. I'll just speak for a moment about what we've done in NetHope for the last 3 or 4 years. We are a collaboration of 35 international NGOs, collectively in 180-some countries around the world, in the global south, essentially. And we decided, our members, a number in the room, David Goodman from the International Rescue Committee, and a number of others here of our members said, why don't we work together? I mean, novel idea, right? Why don't we work together to rationalize part of our back office, if you will? So they chose initially the help desk. Plain, sort of simple function. You all deal with help desk if you've been in a corporation. And it's hard enough to do this in one organization, but they did it across 8 organizations, where they enabled one another to come together through this collaboration, and they built a cloud solution, or we acquired a cloud solution. I remember hearing, as this group was working on this in the early days and they had the training wheels on, someone maybe a couple years in saying, you know, I'm getting cost savings out of this. This is great. But I honestly thought the goodwill would fade away. And we'd be in this a couple years in. I almost fell on my chair when I heard this and say, you know what? We like you guys, but we just don't do it that way here. We just do it differently. And they said, you know what we found? We all pretty much do it the same way in the middle, in the back office. And guess what? It's now really taking off, and this humanitarian cloud is a part of that. And now we can turn our attention, in addition to building out this capability, we can also turn our attention to do the things that enable the activities and the missions of the NGOs and many of you in this room to do what you do better on the front end, the front office piece. So I'm going to ask you to speak a little bit. Some of you touched on it. We see the value right away on the efficiency side. Talk about how you see the effectiveness side, as you know some of the organizations in this room and many of you are working with. We don't have to go straight down the line. Please mix it up. Yeah. We'll get a little energy here.
We can alternate ends a little bit or something. So I'll give you just one example, and that's spreading expertise. And it's sort of interesting online. There's been a lot of chatter about scale, and is that sort of the issue of the day versus disruption, which I guess was the issue last year that people were talking about. So to me, how do you scale expertise, right? And so a great example that I heard over lunch was with the Humanitarian Cloud taking an idea of essentially a school district application. And so people with expertise have developed that. We're actually using that here in the US, and then taking that exact example and making it available to other countries around the world and people in the field to be able to take and make use of. So all of a sudden they've got the use of all this great computing expertise and scale and facilities and all that sort of stuff. They don't have to worry about the experts that have driven the bits that go into the software to make that school district application, and then all of a sudden they can just start using it in different parts of the world to improve the situation in their area. So there's a cool way.
I'm going to give you a very interesting kind of case example not too long ago, where I worked with a bunch of government services in the aftermath of Hurricane Katrina. They had built a data center literally on the beach when they first did this stuff in the New Orleans area. And when the hurricane came along, it was literally under 8 feet of water. And it was their hub for many of their basic government services. In the aftermath, they decided that they had learned a lesson. They were going to now build their new data center 100 miles inland in a bunker, because this was going to survive a hurricane. And when I visited it, it was probably the size of this room when they were finished with it. And there were 9 little computers sitting in the middle of this room. And the reason was computing had changed in the 4 years that they took to build this data center. Consolidation, virtualization. So what happened was they built this data center for yesterday's computing. And it was this humongous building, and I asked them, you know, what are you going to do about it? And they said, we are going to decommission it. We're going to move everything to the cloud because we're paying millions of dollars to heat and cool basically an empty building. So my point to you is that as innovation changes, you need to look out and kind of look to where you need to be in the next couple of years because it's probably going to be very different than where you are today.
Great. Well, you kind of brought up the point of there's kind of this baseline infrastructure play, which is, by the way, a free up of probably considerable CapEx budget, right, which everybody would benefit from redirecting those dollars. So I think that was the first point you're trying to make. But the more interesting story when applications and when business processes, when processes go to the cloud is we can rethink how we're doing work, right? And which is, and if you just look around the room, you know, people are on mobile devices and iPads and everything, and you know, that your next set of apps are going to be deployed on the cloud, right? So the work you're doing today will be redone in the next 2 to 3 years. All the apps that you have in house will be rewritten and deployed in the cloud, right? And that's the second payout for moving to the cloud.
And access through all kinds of different mobile devices.
Yeah, definitely a post.
Bring your own device kind of thing.
Yeah, definitely a post-PC world, as we heard the one laptop per child, right?
Yeah,
you know,
exactly.
Moving on to different platforms,
Great.
different OSs, yeah.
Aziz, do you have a chip shop before we move to the next question?
Yeah, I do work with a large number of NGOs and, you know, mainly for Africa, India, and China. One of my worst, you know, nightmares was how to get the technology delivered to these countries. You know, lots of challenges around logistics, taxation, customs, so on and so forth. Now, with such model in place, I don't really need to worry about that at all. All what I need to do is think about what applications can we have and put on the infrastructure that would solve a certain problem in a certain country and allow, you know, the local NGOs to have access as if they were sitting with me in the same office. So that's one thing, you know, I think it's a great added value that we'll start seeing from this coming and, you know, into action. And the other thing, you know, like we have some application that we developed for certain, you know, to basically for healthcare or education. Now I can take the same application, put it on the infrastructure, and have broader access, so easier replication, cheaper and more affordable to everybody, including, you know, donors' money and the NGOs as well.
I'd like to move to another question, and I know all of us have our dreams in life, and we all are on missions, or you wouldn't be here thanks to our friend Aziz and others inviting us in this large sort of community gathering. And I know we've all, as we think of realizing what it is we're passionate about in life, there, as life presents itself, whether in the individual or in the larger sense, there are inhibitors to what we want to achieve, right? I used to call it years ago the death of a vision. And I'd try to do something and I'd find out I couldn't quite do it that way, and it would kind of be buried for a while and come back another way. So I want to ask the group and move to the second question, which is, what are some of the sort of, a lot is unknown about this journey. We're on a journey, and we kind of have the training wheels on now. But as we look ahead, what are some of the potential inhibitors? What are some of the potential obstacles? What are some of the anticipated risks, both on the technical and probably more so perhaps on the human side as well, the change side? So I'd like to maybe start with Doug now and let him take it and kind of mix it up again on how do you address that? What are they and how would we address them?
Yeah, so I would think moving to the cloud and you know, successful deployment of a more flexible infrastructure. Probably the biggest obstacle is old line thinking, right? The way we used to do things. And there's obviously people who are used to a certain way that processes and IT works. So that's probably the biggest inhibitor we see. You know, if you've heard of the idea of you know, digital natives and digital immigrants, right? We definitely are living in a world of where the digital immigrants are asking for new flexible infrastructure, and a lot of us or digital natives, a lot of us digital immigrants, right, who grew up with old line systems, that's got to kind of change.
Absolutely. Aziz, why don't we let you speak to this? I know you've tackled some hard problems in the health space, but extrapolate, if you will, and say what you think some of the anticipated obstacles or hindrances might be.
Actually, I'll give you an example. You know, I had a meeting in Kenya, you know, and we were dealing with two different ministries of health. Believe it or not, they have two different ministers. Because, you know, I don't understand why, but that's the way it is. And we wanted to build this cloud, use the infrastructure we put in place for the early infants diagnosis, and use it for other diseases like malaria and others. So basically, it can be used on behalf of the Ministry of Health to provide services for the entire country. They talked about, you know, the privacy and confidentiality of data. You know, how can we share this information with other, you know, organizations? So that was a main issue. But, you know, what was, you know, struck me that, you know, they didn't, you know, have a clear vision about how cloud can be helping them reducing actually their costs, because you don't have to worry about anything whatsoever in terms of management of the network and even the system itself. So that, I think, is the main problem I see out there.
Chris is ready to jump in. Go, Chris.
I'll be very quick. Two issues I see. One of skill sets and getting the right skill sets in the right place. As we look in the future, there are going to be very different skills required. And then the other issue is control. And you related to that. There's a feeling that using the cloud somehow is losing control of whatever you're doing. And we have to get over that hurdle that is not a loss of control, but in fact an enablement capability.
So we've begun the journey. This stuff is easy to talk about, but kind of hard to do. But I think we've got the right resources here to move it along. Our third question has to do with sort of how you see the corporate partners represented by yourselves and how other collaborators suggesting, and only in 5 minutes, which is all we have left, can we sort of suggest whet the appetites of folks in the room in terms of how they might join in some form. So perhaps we'll just go down the line and make it efficient this time.
Sure. All right, so I guess a couple of things. So one, go to the website, check out thehumanitariancloud.org. So explore that, see if it's something that can help out with your organization and help you scale that expertise around the world. And then I think the other thing, and I'm sort of think after listening to Intel and Verizon and Coca-Cola and sort of the titans of brand and industry in the U.S. And I think of our company, and we're sort of like the millennials coming up, right? And how can we cross that barrier and do more as an organization and satisfy our shareholders simultaneously? And I think about, you've heard today, all the stuff that's happening is going to drive a lot of traffic, which will help all these businesses. So if we can build a system that will deal with the demands of girls around the world living in $2,000 homes, working on like genome sequencing on their $100 laptops, that's a lot of traffic and a lot of data, right? Yeah. So that's good for all of us. So if we can bridge that gap and make our shareholders see the connection as rapidly as possible.
Doug.
One way I think to stay connected is I was checking out your blog this morning, and so I thought the NetHope blog is a great resource to keep up to date on this topic, right? So
I didn't pay you for that.
And I didn't. I just went and read it on my own. I tweeted it out there. So I'm giving you some press out there. So I think that your blog is actually a great way to keep up to date on this topic, because that's probably where we're going to see a lot of the updates happening, right?
Great, absolutely. Yeah. Thank you.
So I would say that what I would say here is we can help not all of you, but some of you, obviously, because we cannot do everything on our own, but we can help you either build the infrastructure, the middleware, the devices, everything around the cloud. But more importantly, the fact that we use the power of our 350 employees around the globe. So we have people actually, I would say, in every single country where we operate. And that's something we can utilize together and talk about how can we get them involved with you, help you build a strategy moving forward.
Very quickly, I'd like to take the words of this ex-CIO of the United States, which is cloud first in everything you do. I think it's a good way to see if you can deploy that way. It probably ought to be the way that you go first. And so, building and working with these great group of partners and building the infrastructure is a really important thing, we believe.
Great, thanks. I want to add one comment, and that is we've talked a lot about the sort of infrastructure as a service and that side of the equation. We also are building, with the help of our friends at USAID, Microsoft, HP, and others, a front portal for apps. So many of you are developing apps, and a lot of grassroots apps are being developed, and we would stay tuned, watch this space. You're going to be able to put those apps up, crowdsource them, and access and download them anywhere in the world. I mean, NetHope and its members are in 180-some countries around the world. So we're seeing health, education, microfinance, and many other kinds of apps, and even serious social gaming, games and so forth that are related to the youth in the Middle East, for example, up in that app store. So open your mind up and think of the opportunities to utilize this sort of access point in the cloud that comes down to the form of any device anywhere in the world where you can get access. You see this as an opportunity where you can engage and kind of get in that marketplace as well as take advantage of the efficiencies on the back end. So both efficiency and effectiveness once again. I'd like to just summarize what I heard today under kind of 3 topic areas. We went through the 3 questions. We had wonderful insights from our panelists. I've had a number of different 3 different careers, and in this 3rd career that I'm in now, I see the validation of something I developed in the 1st career, and there were 3 questions I struggled with as a young person starting out, and someone I thought about how you get stuff done in life. And one question that I have was, is it a good idea? The second is, well, really, early on, could I make money with it? But now, can I get results? And thirdly, do I have the resources to make it happen? Can I pull it off? And so I would just ask you to think about this as you think about the Humanitarian Cloud, and please come up afterwards and exchange cards with the panelists or email us or contact us some other way. Is it a good idea? I think it's an amazingly brilliant idea. When I first heard this from someone, I said, for 30 or 40 years, in my case, I've heard people talk about something being transformative, and I kind of discounted it. This actually is transformative. I actually think it could be. I think it's a good idea. You may disagree, but I think it's a good idea, and we have to think that through. Secondly, can we produce results, whether it's money or nonprofit results, however you measure your impact, can you use it to measure your impact and advance your cause? And the third is, do you have the assets or the resources or the management to pull it off? And that's the biggest and the hardest, biggest challenge and the most difficult part. We have investors in this room and others that take risks, people on this stage. The most difficult part is getting the team to make it happen. Fortunately, we kind of have the setup for success here. We've got all these groups coming together to saying, we're going to make this happen. We're going to increase the odds of this taking place, and we're going to see it happen in our lifetimes. We want to thank you very much for this opportunity to have this panel.